Fate Be Changed, Chapter 14, Merida. The first thing that struck Merida was the chill that permeated the stagnant air inside the McCameron Castle's wet larder. From the moment she entered this frigid, dark room where she was to spend her mornings packing the meats and fish for the household, Merida had wondered how she expected to do her job without freezing to death. "You paying attention, lass?" Duncan Craig, the head of the kitchens, asked. "Yes," Merida lied. But maybe she needed to pay attention. She knew nothing about preserving meats. The last thing she wanted to do was cause the entire household to become sick, or worse, poison her own mother with unpreserved mutton. Duncan nodded and motioned for her to follow. Merida could tell from the looks of the other servants sent her way that having the head of the kitchens escort her on this tour was an anomaly. Some servants were curious, while others looked anxious, as if afraid of making a misstep while the boss was around. What surprised Merida most, and unnerved her, was the jealousy she detected in a few of the stares. She did not pay much attention to household staff politics, but it made sense that any preferential treatment shown to her could be perceived as a threat to others, especially those servants who had worked at McCameron Castle for years, or who had aspirations of elevating their status on the staff. It was a complication she had not considered when Eleanor first suggested this plan to keep her in the castle. She, Duncan, and Duncan's younger sister, Sorcha, who had been tasked with assisting Merida during her first day in her new role, ended their tour in the dry larder, where the flour, meal, and breads were stored. Merida had not previously taken note of how much bigger McCameron Castle was than Dunbrock, but the sheer size of their kitchens told the story. It made her wonder how much land fell within McCameron Kingdom, and how many of the chieftains had pledged fealty to her grandfather. A grandfather she still yet to meet. She wondered if she would ever get the chance. Though Merida had been at McCameron Castle for only 2 full days, she had noticed the stark difference in how her mother ran her household at Dunbrock compared with her parents. Queen Eleanor treated her staff like family, while the McCamerons could not be bothered to share a brief greeting. This entire castle was colder, and not just the temperature. It made Merida long for the warmth and gaiety she had foolishly taken for granted in her own home. "Do you have any questions about the arrangement of the kitchens?" Duncan asked her now. No," Merida shook her head. "It is just like She paused, hesitant to reveal anything about the kitchens back home. She and Eleanor still needed to discuss exactly what their story would be regarding Merida's background, but she knew she would not mention Dunbrock. "It is just as I expected it would be," she finished. She wrapped her arms around her upper body. "Though I did not think it would be so cold." "The food would sour if it were not this cold, which is why you must keep the doors closed at all times," Duncan said. "You sure you can handle this, lass?" The intensity in his tone spoke to the seriousness with which he took his job. "Yes," Merida vigorously nodded. "I can handle it." "Of course you can handle it," Sorcha added. "She's a canny lass, this one, I can tell." "You make sure to watch her," Duncan said it to his sister. He returned his attention to Merida. "I know the princess wants you here, but if you cannot do the work, I cannot have you in my kitchens. It's as simple as that, lass." "I can do the work," Merida assured him, even though she wasn't so sure she could. Over the next hour, Merida made the trek to the underground ice house 3 times to replenish the ice used to keep the food cold, and salted more than 2 dozen large herring. The back-breaking tasks made her appreciate the work the staff at Castle Dunbrock conducted in order to get a hot meal on their plates every day. She wiped her hands with a square of linen before scratching behind her ear. The area had been irritating her since the ride back from the Dunbrock men's camp. She wished she could see the spot. It felt hairy, as if something was growing there. It had been one of the shrubs she had rubbed off against while riding. She would have to be more careful. "You're looking a bit weenach," Sorcha said. "Should I fetch the physician?" No, Merida said. "I'm not sick, I don't like fish." The younger girl let out a hearty peal of laughter. "Then you're working in the wrong job, lass. The McCamerons love his herring. You'll see lots of it." Just then the door to the larder flew open, and Eileen stormed inside, her blue eyes shooting daggers at Merida. The girl had taken a disliking to her, but Merida did not have the faintest idea why. Was it because Merida was a stranger? "What is the cause for all this cackling?" Eileen asked. "Is that how you get work done, Sorcha? Do you think your brother would have something to say about you carrying on in such a way? Sorcha's smile instantly vanished. It was replaced by a somber frown. He would not like it, the younger girl answered. She looked to Merida. Eileen is right. We should get back to work. Eileen did not address Merida at all, except to scowl at her before turning on her heel and stomping out of the larder in the same stormy way she had entered. It took every amount of control Merida possessed not to call out an angry retort to the girl's unnecessary nastiness. It would seem her mother's constant badgering for Merida to maintain her temper had been for naught. Instead of allowing the dour Eileen to put a damper on what had been an otherwise agreeable, if tiring, morning, Merida chose to lighten the mood. She leaned across the marble dressing slab and whispered, "Who put bugs in her breeches?" Sorcha's eyes widened in shock, though Merida could see her fighting not to smile. Eileen is Duncan's second in command, Sorcha explained. She likes her job serious-like. Her shoulders lifted and fell with a deep sigh. And she thinks I do not belong here in the kitchens. She thinks I got the job because I am Duncan's sister. Why should that matter? Merida asked, scratching the back of her head against her apron. As long as you were good at it, you deserve to be here as much as she does. Twin spots of red instantly blossomed on Sorcha's cheeks, but then she stood up straight. You're right about that, and it is not if you would ever see her in the larder. She thinks she's too good for such work. In my opinion, no meal would ever be prepared if not for the work done here in the larder, or the scullery, or the other parts of the kitchen lassies like Eileen think are beneath them. Sorcha beamed. You know, I like you, Merida. I'm glad you hit your head and landed here in the kitchens at McCameron Castle. Merida laughed. Well, I'm not happy about this bump on my head, but I'm still happy to be here. Are you sure about that? Sorcha asked, a cagey smile tipping up the corner of her mouth. Then she reached down and plopped a large herring on the table. Get to salting. Merida and Sorcha kept things going in the wet larder until the midday meal. The family feasted on roasted herrings, haggis, cabbage, and kale sautéed with onions, boiled turnips, and oat cakes prepared by the slew of cooks. Merida's mouth watered at the thought of filling her belly with the savory dishes. But when she lined up the rest of the kitchen staff to retrieve her meal, she was served a bowl of thick vegetable pottage along with a chunk of bread. Is this it? Merida balked. Sorcha shot her that wide-eyed look again. A moment later, Merida heard the snide voice she was already coming to resent. What did you think we would be eating, lass? Roasted pheasant? Eileen asked. Pheasant was one of her absolute favorites, but as a member of the staff, she guessed there would be no pheasant, no meat at all, in her future. Was the kitchen staff at Castle Dunbrock given meat with their meals, or were they fed only vegetable stews like this one? Merida had no idea. She was hit with a sudden sense of deep shame at how little she did know about their staff. It was something she must rectify when she returned home. After all, the staff's well-being would fall under her list of responsibilities as a member of the royal family. I was only inquiring about the bread, Merida answered. I love bread. Well, I'm sure if you ask the princess, she will make sure you get extra in the morn, Eileen said. Merida swallowed down the acerbic retort she longed to level at the hateful girl. She had more important things to contend with than engaging in verbal sword fights with the likes of Eileen, like figuring out how to get her parents together. I shall enjoy the portion I have been given, Merida replied with a sweet smile. Eileen's gaze was colder than the ice house underneath them. Feed your ma's, then get back to work, she said. She looked directly at Merida. The fisherman just brought in a load of fresh cod and herring. You make sure you salt them. With a sigh, Merida returned to the wet larder, where a multitude of fish sat on the bed of ice. She reached for the first one and snatched her hand back. What is... Merida's voice trailed off. She stared at the backs of her hands, unsure what to make of the stubby patches on her skin. It looked almost like... fur? She brought her hands closer, inspecting the fine hairs peppering her knuckles. They itched, just like that spot behind her ear. What poison plant had she come across in the forest that had created such a rash? What sort of rash caused one to grow hair? She did not want to bring any more attention to herself, but maybe she should call on the McCameron's physician again. Maybe he could make a salve to cure this peculiar ailment, and maybe he could tell her what had caused it so that she could avoid coming in contact with it again.